Good afternoon from a sacred space at Titania's realm. It's Friday the 13th of March 2026 and the time is 2:01 p.m. So yesterday I had root canal work done on a tooth that will now have to be pulled because I'm a living anomaly, and I had yet again 3 roots to one tooth, which is not normal, and 2 of the roots were very small canals, so the student specialist dentist wasn't able to get into them to remove the infection. So the root that she was in, which was the main larger one, she did put some antibiotic medication in, and then we temporarily close the tooth because it's going to get pulled hopefully ASAP before I run to sepsis. So and I'm waiting for the 24th of March to have this bottom tooth pulled. So I'm a bit of a mess, as you can imagine. I'm running a bit of a low-grade fever, so I've got a wet cloth, and I've had tummy upsets, which I think is partially from having to have 8 injections of anaesthetic, but also I'm lactose intolerant, and for soft food it was cool in the mouth and easy to swallow. I had custard, which probably wasn't such a brilliant bloody idea, but I came home from after having to catch 2 buses and I was very weak, and my primeval Bodicea instinct was to pour food down my throat because I hadn't had much to eat during the day and felt very weak. So today I've been very weak indeed because of the tummy upset. But you know, I didn't expect to be feeling hale and hearty after that ordeal yesterday. Even the dentist admitted, she said, I'm sorry I tortured you, and thank you for letting me practice on your root canal tooth. Well, I was under the delusion that they'd be able to remove the infection and I could get better, but it's not looking so good at the state at the state. And the professor, she had to call down a few times to supervise, was German or Austrian or Swiss, and took an instant dislike to me, as men authority figures often do. And you know, it's appalling actually. But at one point he looked at me and he said to me, you talk too much. What? I could barely talk at all. I had a dental dam over my mouth, rubber and a brace to hold everything closed. What do you even mean? I know exactly what he means. The bastard. So I just stared right back at him and said, then I will die with my mouth open. Which I hope he understood what I was saying back and could interpret it through all the paraphernalia in my gob. So in defiance of government dentists that are really just paid henchmen to abuse you when you're in your most vulnerable state, I can't say the women were nasty. My dentist, I don't know if she's Russian or Serbian, but she had a Russian sounding name, was lovely, very kind to me. And the dental nurse was both nurses I saw both yesterday and the previous visit were very kind. They kind of look at me like I'm a dead woman walking, and I guess I am. I mean, I'm convinced that it's my teeth that are going to ultimately kill me now. They were just left too long, and they can't get to the infection because of the weird deformed root system, which my lovely dentist yesterday said to me is shaped like a Mickey Mouse hat, you know, like Disney Mickey Mouse. She showed me, I could see it on the 3D scan, the shape of it. She said it's an abnormal shape and it has 3 roots instead of 1. She said, we wondered why they only did half a root in the tooth and one big long one only halfway. And I said, yeah, why did they do that? Were they idiots? She said, no, the reason is they couldn't see, because they didn't have the scanning technology back in 2017. They literally couldn't see that you have 3 roots instead of 1 or 2. Dear Goddess. So she spent hours really trying hard, and she's a very sweet woman. I'm not angry with her. I'm a bit disgusted with the professor, who was dispassionate and disinterested and a bit fucking sadistic, telling me that I talk too much. Layers of threat just in that alone. But he probably didn't realise that, although he was German, Swiss or Austrian, that I'm half German and I can dish it back like the best of them. And being a Jew, I'm not inclined to take shit from anyone. I don't care how many professorships they have. I was thoroughly a bit disgusted, actually. But I won't take it personally. He's probably a bastard to everyone. It's not just little old me, you know. It's just one of those types throwing his meat around as if he's whipping everyone with it. I actually feel sorry for that dentist having to work under his supervision, because she's got 3 years to qualify as a specialist. And I even heard her say at one point, you know, I need him to come and check on things. He left her high and dry. So by doing that, he left me high and dry. It's almost calculated and deliberate. So I spent much of today between bouts of diarrhea and a mild fever, freaking out that I'm being deliberately left to die with my teeth. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, I've struggled with them for 18 months, so how long is a piece of string? If the Holy One decides that I get sepsis and I die within 2 days, so be it. But in the, and I know that sounds melodramatic, people of Earth, but, you know, I'm kind of done going to hospitals only to be abused by staff members, especially highly qualified, top of their profession staff members. It's beyond bizarre. They never did give me his full name, otherwise I would have laid a formal complaint. They just called him Prof. Anyway, I talk too much, yes, and I use my YouTube videos to describe the systemic abuses that are going on that impact me directly. So yes, I talk too much, and as I said to him, I will die with my mouth open and my words out in the ether somewhere, just in case it might assist some other patient gets treated better, or certainly not put in a life-threatening situation of sepsis and on top of it being abused. I'm livid. So in the theme of dying with my mouth open, I've decided to read another story. It's a very long story, so it's probably a 2 or 3 video one. So I'll read until I can't physically read anymore and I'm too exhausted, given that, you know, I am in recovery and probably shouldn't be using my words at all. But oh, don't they want you silenced and docile and beaten down and utterly destroyed, because WEF tells them to kill the population. It's all part of the evil plan, people of Earth. We all know, those of us who've got an ounce of intelligence No, it's no accident that I get treated badly when I come to hospitals. They hope that I'll top myself. They do. Saves them having to cull me out. Have the questions appearing on the file, fuckers. Anyway, I told my female specialist dentist student that I'm proud of her, and I am proud of her. She did a very good job, as best as she could do, given that she had minimal support from that man, and there's 3 roots. And in the end, she went and conferred with him, and even he admitted to her, or maybe that's gaslighting, who can tell, that he would have trouble accessing the canals since they're very small and there's 2 of them. So I agreed, that it would be best, rather than do another root canal session and go through all that discomfort and trauma and pain again, to just pull the tooth. So it's going to be fun and games going back for this one on the 24th, and whenever they book me in for this one. I hope they don't leave it too long, because I am at risk of dying of sepsis. I actually googled it. It takes 2 days to die of sepsis, sometimes a little bit longer. And I thought about it, and I thought it'll be excruciatingly painful and beyond awful. But it is what it is, if it comes to it. And the high strangeness coming home on the buses yesterday, which I wrote about on Facebook and made public posts, was both comical and a bit astounding. So on we go and on we go, people of Earth. Another day in this body, mind and spirit, defiant, and with my mind open and my heart open and my mouth open, because I will not be silenced. There's some other, a better Otto, a Deborah Eisenberg. I don't know why I committed us to any of those things, Otto said. I'd much prefer to be working or reading, and you'll want all the time you can get to practice. You can get this week to practice. It's fine with me, William said. I always like to see Sharon, and we'll survive the evening with your... Otto winced. Sorry, people of Earth, I know I'm all over the place, and I call it flubbery. I just think I'll get some more water before we get stuck into the story too far. Very, very humid and hot today, and it was very hot yesterday, 35 degrees. So, but now we have a storm coming, rain, it'll be nice and refreshing. Lovely. Right, Otto winced. Well, we will, William said. And don't you want to see Naomi and Margaret and the baby as soon as they get back? One moment. Throw a bit of light on the situation. Open mouth, truth speaking, and light. I wonder if I'll get sent to the light when I leave this body, mind and spirit complex. actually don't really care anymore. It's how done I am. Only the gods can decree where they'll send me next, what missions they'll put me on next. Everyone always says, don't you want to see the baby? Don't you want to see the baby? But if I did want to see a fat, bald, confused person, obviously I'd only have to look in the mirror. I concur, except fortunately I'm not bald yet. Less of be on that one. Also, apart from the confusions changing over buses yesterday, feeling very fragile and weak, I'm not that confused. I know exactly what's going on. I'll tell you one thing though, the nurse yesterday, I think she was Japanese. She could have been Korean, but I have a feeling, I don't know why, but I have a feeling she was Japanese. And throughout the whole root canal, she sat on the chair beside me to my left, but in a position where her knee was pressed just up against my, under my armpit here kind of thing, because I had my hands on the, chair armrests, holding on, occasionally waving my hands around with kind of movement therapy, I guess. I'm used to talking with my hands, and I couldn't talk because I had my face jammed full of instruments, so I was musing and meditative, partially disassociated. But that young lady having her knee pressed into me, I think it was deliberate. I don't know whether they tell them to or whether she just chose to. And I didn't get an opportunity to thank her later, but it was very grounding. It was like being embraced, but not. And it's so long since I've been held in an embrace and cuddled and kissed and treated with any tenderness at all. So very long that was actually kind of, it wasn't creepy or anything inappropriate. It was kind of respectful. It was just her knee, just sitting there, solid, still, feeling like I was being held. I know that sounds weird, but you know what? That meant a lot to me. Just that feeling that I wasn't alone in the process. And during the course of the surgery, literally, she just sort of begun and was just starting to drill and everything. There was a fire alarm. So then some other staff member came in and said, we have to evacuate, but you've got 7 minutes to finish off what you're doing and pull everything out. 7 minutes, and then I went into kind of a panic because I was already in a heightened trauma panicking state having the surgery, and then that happened. It was just beyond awful. I mean, it's not the staff's fault that someone decided to set off an alarm, probably smoking or something stupid, but it was just so awful. And my dentist said to me, she started there in January, she said it's happened on average every 2 weeks. So someone must be doing it maliciously. It's just beyond awful. So she had to pull everything out of my mouth, and then I was very dizzy and lightheaded because I had all the injections, just not all, but I'd already had a couple of injections. And then we had to walk to the fire escape or to the stairwell. And then as we were walking out, there was a young woman in a wheelchair, quite young, late 20s, early 30s. And I said, what's going to happen to the woman in the wheelchair? And my dentist said, they'll have to carry her down. And in my mind, I was envisaging they'd have to carry her in the wheelchair down. Like, how is that even possible? There'll be a terrible accident. It didn't click on till last night. I realised, no, they mean carry her bodily down the stairs. Anyway, and she just smiled at me, and I thought, here I am, all upset about my fucking teeth, and she's in a wheelchair having her teeth done, and a fire alarm. No, it wasn't a drill. We thought it was a real thing, you know. Anyway, as we were walking down the stairs, my dentist was holding on to my arm. She was very kind to me. She really was. Credit where it's due. And she's very, very slim. So very in a motherly way, I looked at her and said, oh, my darling, you're just so tiny. You're just so slim. And then she looked at me like a daughter, and she said, it's stress, Tanya. It's stress. And then I looked at her and I said, this is not good. She nodded and smiled. Anyway, I said, I'm very dizzy descending these stairs. I'm going to have to hold on to the banister, which I was doing. So she took my left arm and she held me as we walked down the stairs by my left arm, all the way down the stairs, and even held me as we walked. We had to walk quite a long way to where the evacuation yard is, all the way around, past the statue of Hippocrates. I even said, oh look, there's good old Hippocrates. She laughed. First, do no harm, being the ethos of Hippocrates, that they conveniently threw that book out the window with the COVID epoch, didn't they? The bastards. I'll never forgive them what they've done, not just to their training medical dental students, but to the public, to everyone. We've all been tortured by that process, all of us, even the health professionals. Anyway, we waited not terribly long, thankfully, because, you know, time is of the essence. Probably about 15 minutes. And we were allowed to go back in, and I was still weak and dizzy. And when she was holding me, when we were walking down the path and we came out from the staircase, I said, thank you for holding me. I said, I really do feel weak. And she said, I can tell she's Russian or Polish or Eastern European, because that Slavic sense of humour. She says, I have to hold you so you don't run away. I looked at her. She was joking, you know, half joking. And I looked at her in amazement. I said, do they really run away, the patients? She said, yes, they run like hell. And I just looked at her and we both burst out laughing. I said, it didn't enter my mind, because I know I'm in trouble with this tooth, and I know I have to go along with this whole thing in the hope that I get better. Anyway, so I just sort of tell you that she was a wonderful woman, but under the auspices of a man who was dry and supercilious, and a German, who took one look at me and decided that I talk too much. The fucker. If I die, people of Earth, I will die with my mouth open, from my lips to God's ears, and with my truth. Right. Where were we? Ah, yes. Bald, fat, confused person. Obviously, I'd only have to look in the mirror. I was reading a remarkable article in the paper this morning about holiday depression. William said, should I clip it for you? The statistics were amazing. The statistics cannot have been amazing. The article cannot have been remarkable. And I am not depressed. I just happen to be bored sick by these inane waving our little antennae, joining our little paws, an indication of, oh, what is the point? Or why did I agree to any of this? Well, William said, I mean, this is what we do. Yes, I feel like I had a bit of a soul contract with that beautiful dentist. And I meant it when I said I'm proud of her. She said that she had the option after 16 years of working as a GP dentist in Toowoomba of retiring or going on to improve her skills to be a specialist. And she decided to improve her skills. Isn't that amazing? It shows you're doing what you really love when you know, career develop rather than just quit while you're ahead and retire and get out of the fucking draconian Queensland health system. Well, I guess, you know, what can you do? Gotta work, gotta achieve, and in her case, help people. It's kind of a soul trap in a way, isn't it? Sometimes a bit of a torture device too, dear goddess. But don't worry, I was thrown into my shamanic abilities on the bus coming home, the first bus. I sat with 3 young people and they started chatting to me. 2 young women in their mid-20s and a young man. And I told them I'd just come from the dental hospital, so I was feeling a bit weak and a bit confused. And then randomly, the one young woman was Indigenous and the other young woman was white. And the white young woman said to me that she was suicidal. And the Indigenous woman said, don't be ridiculous, it was your birthday yesterday. So I looked at her, I said, was it really your birthday yesterday? She said, yes, but I'm suicidal. Well, I know the feeling. Struggled with suicidal ideation all my life because of the, you know, the primordial wounding when I was 6 years old. So I looked at this beautiful young girl and instantly I knew what the backdrop of that was. Not saying it, but understanding it. So I looked at her and I said to her, are you often suicidal? She said, yes, all the time. Sometimes I'm homicidal too. And I thought, is she stirring me up? You know, because the young, they like to stir up little old ladies. But the friend, the male friend who I presume, I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling was gay, said it'll be a dreadful thing to do to all your friends and family. You leave them with that awful shock and awful horror for the rest of their lives doing such a thing, which is completely accurately right. So I said to her, try being 60, almost 61, and having had your 60th birthday sabotaged by an entire music scene out of spite. What, she said? And I went, yeah. I said, and not the first time my birthday had been sabotaged by so-called friends or people that I thought loved me either. So not my first rodeo. So I said, it was like water off a duck's back. But I said, it's not the point though. The point is, it's a really evil thing to do to someone, especially when they know you struggle with trauma issues and depression, and the only thing you look forward to really is your bit of your bloody birthday. Like, for fuck's sake. Anyway, I said to her, promise me, I said, you'll listen to me. She looked at me. I said, I've had 16 near deaths, all close shaves with death, since early childhood. All three of them went, and I went, I have, including, a suicide attempt. Actually, there were 2 suicide attempts, but one was more serious. They looked at me, and I said, if the gods want you out of this planet and they want you dead, young lady, I said, the gods will decide when your time is. She looked at me like this. I said, even your suicide attempts will fail if you're meant to be here. I said, I'm living proof of that. She just looked at me like this. And even the young man went a bit pale, and the beautiful Indigenous woman, their friend, looked pale too. And she said, she's right, the gods decide, the gods decide. And I smiled. I said, the gods truly do decide. And I said to her, and there is a worse thing that happens if you actually complete the suicide. What is that? She said. You run the risk of being sent back to reincarnate in the exact same kind of life you tried to escape from, and have everything happen, every single awful thing happen in succession, like a hell loop, until you get it right. It's not worth it. It's not worth putting yourself through that. And the young man looked at her and looked at me with pride, and he said, she's right, they reckon they do that, make you come back and relive the whole bloody thing, blow by blow. And she looked at me, and I said, and anyway, I said, suicide's, suicide's painless, but it's permanent. Can't change your mind after. Don't know what you're going to miss out on, what lovely things might be around the corner, or how you might grow and evolve into a person that no longer suffers so much and can look back on your life kind of a sanguine kind of sense of circumspect interest. She looked at me, and the young Indigenous woman was so lovely. She said, she's right, she's right. You change a lot as you get older. And I said to her, there are things that you cannot change and you cannot fix. But there are things that you can grow through or grow from. I said, so stop with the suicide nonsense, because it won't resolve any of your issues. Trust me on that one. The 3 of them all looked at me, and they all smiled and nodded. I said, I'll be 61 next month. I said, against all the odds, even with these very difficult toothy issues, I have survived, because the gods have decreed. I had no say in my survival. Not really. I thought I was in charge of my life, but ultimately I've had no real say at all. And they just looked at me in astonishment. And then I said to them, so tell me, I said, where are you off to celebrate your birthday? You're going to do something really lovely? They said, yes, we're getting off at South Bank. And I said, oh, are you going to go to the movies? No, they said. We're going to go and have a few drinks somewhere in a nice club or restaurant somewhere there. I said, how delightful. I said, I would join you, but I'm going to be in no fit state to be drinking anything alcoholic after my ordeal today. So I said, you have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon and evening. And they were really nice kids, I looked at them and I thought, could be all my grandchildren, my babies. They're all out there in the world, my babies that I never got to hold on my arms and watch grow up. You're all out there. Come to me in my crisis. It was kind of a crisis. So I said, so I'll get off at South Bank with you because that's where I'll change the bus to catch my 180 bus. So we all got off the bus together, 4 of us, and then I just sort of walked around in kind of a daze because it was crowded on the bus stop, and I don't know, I felt disorientated and I was walking around in circles. And the the young Aboriginal woman, their friend, was looking at me. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm just a bit confused and a bit disorientated. I said, where to catch the 180 from? She said, I'm pretty sure it comes to this platform. She said, wait a minute, I'll Google it. She had the TransLink app ready, on her phone. And she just held my hand a little bit. She was such a sweet girl. I want to cry. My healers that come to me when I'm in medical or dental crisis are often Indigenous people. It's really quite beautiful and astonishing. So she wasn't there in the capacity as a healer. We'd just met on the bus, but she took the time to look for the bus, and she said, yes, it comes through here, you just have a seat, Tanya, and wait for the bus, it definitely comes through. Oh, thank you, I said. Have a lovely afternoon. And so off the 3 of them went, Hopefully that other young lady will remember my words to not suicide, because frankly, it's a waste of time and pointless. Even if you succeed at it, it's a waste of time and pointless. It's cheating your soul out of growth potentiates and beauty, and finding people who are kind and loving, like I experienced yesterday. So I caught the 180, and on the 180, again, no sooner I got on the bus, it was very busy and had to stand up and hang off those struts, And I wasn't too concerned because I wasn't feeling too weak. I was just grateful to be going home. And there was a young woman sitting next to a very blonde, fair young woman sitting next to an Indian lady. And she just looked up into my face. And the look was of like recognition, looking into my face. Like, it was actually quite astonishing how she looked at me, like this moment, like this, almost like you can hear a choir of angels. I'm like, what's going on? Am I high from all the bloody anesthetics? Am I in some altered state? Because I do go into altered states, when I have medical or dental procedures. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I won't buy into it because I'm a bit of a mess trying to get myself home. Just a slob on a bus, trying to get myself home. What if God was one of us? God was with me yesterday, very powerfully. And the reason being, I kept repeating Psalm 23 over and over and over while I was being drilled into, praying for extra protection, just being superstitious, if nothing else, and also meditative, take my mind off it. So the young lady sees me and she jumps up immediately and she said, you can have my seat if you'd like. So I looked, and there was a man on the other end of the seat, but there was room for all 4 of us to sit on the seat. And I said, well, if you don't mind, if we scooch up a bit, we can all sit together and we'll all fit. And the Indian lady just smiled in acknowledgement. So we didn't scooch up to the man, we scooched a little bit further along as three women. Women do that, you know, we're very tribal and protective of each other. It's quite sweet. Anyway, so the young lass looks at me, and I have a feeling she was on the autistic spectrum. Like, no judgment, it doesn't mean she's crazy or anything, but just her speech was very slow and measured, and she took great notice of even the tiniest details, which is often, quite a few of my autistic friends are like that. They notice quite astonishing details. And so she looks at me and she says, I want to tell you, I love your nose ring. Well, my nose ring used to be a lot more colourful, but it's actually lost a lot of its colours. I've got another one the same size. I might actually swap it out because it's not colourful how it used to be. It's faded. Anyway, so I was a bit astonished at her commenting on my nose ring. So I looked at her and I said, I like your nose ring too. She had a little stud and a little, very discreet little septum nose ring. And then she had other little piercings on her. I think it was one here as well, or two. Anyway, she was a pretty young woman. And she says, yes, and I love your glasses. She says, I love how they're all red and pink. And she says, and on the side, she said, even the blue. She said, they're really quite remarkable. I really love them. I'm looking at her. So I said, oh, thank you. And then I said, you're very charming. And then the Indian lady next to her, who was closer to me in age, probably younger than me, probably in her early 50s, but, you know, we were the older, mature woman next to this beautiful young girl, you know. So she looks at me again, the young lass. We didn't swap names. And she said, and I love your flower in your hair. So I pull out my flower. I said, I made it. I said, but it's a bit beaten up, all the paint's worn off. But I said, I put the flower on. I make my hair clips. I said, they're good for, I always wear one in my hair. I said, because when it gets very hot, I can put my hair up with the clip. And she had her hair up in a kind of a clip too. And she said, yes, that's what I do too. And I went, yes, because Queensland, because it's so hot. And so anyway, and then randomly she starts telling me, she says, no, I asked, I said, are you coming home from school? She sort of had like a beige pair of slacks and a beigey coloured top. Didn't look like a school uniform, but I don't know, she just looked so young. Like, I actually thought she was only 17. And then she looks at me and she says, no, I'm 19 and I'm coming from work and I work for the Brisbane City Council. And I'm looking at her a bit astonished because she just looked like a kid, you know. And I said to her, oh, do you? I said, what do you do? She says, I do invoices. I said, oh, that's not all that much fun, is it? It'd be a bit boring. And she went, yes, it is boring. I said, oh, well, you might get a promotion. She said, no, this is my promotion. I got promoted to doing invoices. So I smiled. And then she was so sweet. She says, you know, I make very good money. She said, my co-worker has to support her husband and her entire family on the money she earns, but I get to keep my money. And everyone on the bus kind of all turned their head and looked and kind of giggled, you know, but how open she was with me. And I said to her, well, that's good, my darling. You get to keep your own money and not have to, you know, support anyone else. I said, I hope you'll buy yourself a nice car. I've got a car, she said. And then I said, well, in that case, I hope you buy yourself a nice house. Because, you know, it's hard for young people now working, trying to get themselves a nice house. It's almost become an impossible dream. Anyway, I looked up and there was another young woman in her late 20s just glaring at me, seething with rage. But it's not a lie. It happens to be true. I'm like, well, fuck you. I don't even know you anyway. Why are you listening to my conversation? But anyway, the Indian lady was quietly nodding and listening, you know. And then the young girl says to me, I'm not ready to buy a house yet. She says, I keep finding boyfriends that are unemployed and don't own cars and have no money. And I said, well, that's not a good pathway. She said, I just broke up with one because he was just unemployed and had nothing and expected me to give him all my money. I went, wise. And everyone on the bus is listening, by the way. And the Indian lady was looking at me and nodding. And I said, then she said to me, randomly she says, you'd like my father, he's nearly 60, and she said, and he's single. And the excitement on her face, you know. And I start freaking the fuck out. Oh, she'd also told me that her great-grandfather had escaped a train that was heading to Auschwitz. So I asked her if she was Jewish, and she said, no, we're Polish Catholic. She said, but my grandfather escaped Auschwitz, escaped the train to Auschwitz. And I said, yes. I said, not everyone was Jewish in the concentration camps. There were Roma and, you know, pacifists and communists and all sorts of people that Hitler didn't like. And the Indian lady was nodding, you know, sagely. And I said, I'm actually Jewish. So this creature on the bus, this female, this other young woman was glaring at me, you know. Fuck you, I thought. Fuck you. Anyway, so young one starts saying, give me your phone number. I want to introduce you to my father. And then half joking, because I'm a bit off my head, people, because I'm coming home from root canal surgery. Half joking, I said, is he good looking? And the Indian lady just goes, and starts to laugh. And half the bus start giggling. And I said, does he look like you? They said, because you're pretty. And I said, is Daddy as pretty as you are? And everyone on the bus is like, it was really delightful. And she said, yes, he is good looking. And she said, what is more, she said, he's a free spirit. You'll love him. And I'm just sitting there thinking, I've come from the dentist, writhing in kind of a post-apocalyptic cascade of trauma, and now I'm having men thrown at me. Anyway, she pulls out her phone and she's like, give me your number. And I said, oh no, my darling. I said, no. I said, I need to meet men on my own terms, and I need to eyeball them, and it needs to be my whole idea and, you know, their idea. I said, I don't do blind dating. Why not? She said. I said, that's how I ended up with my dead shit husband. Oh. And then she says, and I said, I don't do internet dating. You'll never find me on the internet either. And the Indian lady's looking at me, and I'm getting more and more triggered, you know. And then she's nodding. She's getting it, because older women were getting it. And the young one goes, oh, she says, well, she gets off at Green Slopes. And before she gets off the bus, she turns to me and she said, I hope to meet you on this route another day coming home from work. I hope we meet again. And everyone on the bus just looks at me as to say, why are you such a bitch? Why don't you just get off the bus with her, go meet her father? They had me all married off on that bus. I tell you what, felt like a hell loop, like an ascension process, like a train going up into heaven. Anyway, it was surreal. Anyway, I didn't go with her because I thought it would be inappropriate, and I didn't give her my number because don't do blind dates. Anyway, so she hops off the bus and I wave her goodbye. She really was a lovely young woman. She really was gorgeous, so sweet and so open and so real. She was me in the form of a 19-year-old girl. I said to her, I got married when I was 19 and 1 month and 8 days. I said, I don't recommend it. I don't want to get married, she said. I said to her, the whole bus is listening. I said, you should get married. You really should get married. And then there was a pause. And everyone turns and looks at me. Even the men. What did this? And I said, but you should wait until you are 25 and your brain has fused together so you know what you're doing with your life and who it is you've chosen. And then the Indian lady just bursts out laughing. So anyway, the young woman gets off the bus, telling me that she hopes that we catch the bus together again. Who can tell? You never can tell. It could happen. Anyway, I turned to the Indian lady who I could see had been listening in and politely, joining in quietly, not intrusively in our conversation. And I turned to her and I said, that young woman made my afternoon. And then she looked at me and she said, and you did too. We just laughed, It was delightful. Anyway, we'll carry on reading the story, shall we? Because I talk too much with my open mouth. Fuck you too. Dentists who happen to be sadist professors everywhere. You know what? If he bothered to get to know me, that man hadn't been such a pig, he would have found him a very nice woman. But anyway, not that I care what he thinks of me. I just need them to pull my rotting teeth out and save my life. But I don't need to fawn or fillet them. Just saying. Gross. He's a nice looking man too. But that's dreadful, isn't it? He's such a fucked personality. Well, anyway, so the story continues. Well, true. And the further truth was, by the way, I can't remember if I said it earlier, the story is written by Deborah Eisenberg, some other better Otto. And the further truth was, Otto saw, that he himself wanted in some way to see Sharon. He himself wanted in some way to see Naomi and Margaret and the baby as soon as possible. And it was even he himself who had agreed to join his family for Thanksgiving. It would be straining some concept, possibly the concept of wanted, possibly the concept of self, to say that he himself had wanted to join them. And yet there clearly must have been an implicit alternative to joining them that was even less desirable. Or he would not, after all, have agreed to it. It had taken him, how long? Years and years to establish a viable, if not pristine, degree of estrangement from his family. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. There's a history, darlings. Which was no doubt why, he once explained to William, he had tended over the decades to be so irascible and easily exhausted. The sustained effort, the subliminal concentration that was required to detach the stubborn prehensile hold was enough to wear a person right out and keep him from ever getting down to anything of real substance, which is what my mother did to me, really, and crushed me at every possible opportunity. 16 years free of her, though. What's the date today? The 13th. It's 16 years and 1 week. Yippee-yi-yo! Here I am with septic rotting fucking teeth I can't even get into. Because that one fillet of mine she took. Guess I can be grateful I've got limbs. Dear goddess. Weddings had lapsed entirely. Birthdays were a phone call at the most. And at Christmas, Otto and William sent lavish gifts of out-of-season fruits, in the wake of which would arrive recriminatory little thank you notes. From excuse me. Right. From mid-December to mid-January, they would absent themselves, not merely from the perilous vicinity of Otto's family, but from the entire country, to frolic in blue water under sunny skies. When his mother died, Otto experienced an exhilarating melancholy. Most of the painful encounters and obligations would now be a thing of the past. Life, with its humorous theatricality, had bestowed and revoked with one gesture, and there he abruptly was, in the position he felt he'd been born for. He was alone in the world. It's not so bad. Except when you have your teeth pulled out and all root canal work. It's a bit awful, but it's not so bad. Better than being with cruel, insensate, vicious, nasty bastards when you're most vulnerable. And like I said, wasn't it gorgeous how the God sent me those 3 young people on the first bus and the young girl of Polish descent on the second bus and the kind Indian lady sitting beside her. They were so kind. So, not so bad. Or, alone in the world, anyway, with William, marching ahead of his sisters and brother, Corinne, Martin and Sharon. Otto was in the front ranks now, death's cannon fodder and so on. He had become old overnight, and free. It was cute when I said to her father about that young girl's father. I said, "Oh, a free spirit. Who doesn't love a free spirit?" And the whole bus went, started giggling. Oh, bless. I might regret not going and meeting him now. Would have been something to do. Might have been someone really loving and genuine this time. But at 61, almost 61, I actually despair of that ever happening. Oh, bless. Anyway. Of course you're not interested, but was how they began. This was the one thing Corinne and her husband and Martin and whichever wife were always all in accord about, that Otto seemed to feel he was too good for the rest of them, despite the obvious indications to the contrary. Who was too good for who? It often came down to a show of force. Oh, by the way, I'm leery of meeting men when I'm vulnerable, like just come from the dentist. I met Dave Charles on a night when I actually had a very bad back and was on multiple painkillers, dancing wildly at Irish Murphys, driving out my own personal demons, writhing in agony. And when I finally sat down, he approached me and he said, "I've been trying to talk to you for 4 months. Where have you been?" I said, "You haven't looked very hard. I've been here the whole time." He says, "Well, you're always dancing. No one can ever get anywhere near you to even talk to you." I said, "There's a reason for that." He said, "Why are you sitting down tonight? Why is this night different from all other nights?" And it was literally like you could have smacked me, poof, with a 4x2, because it's a very Jewish thing. It's a Passover saying. Why is this night different from all other nights? But he's not Jewish. But it was just caught my attention, you know. And I said to him, "Why is tonight different?" I said, "Because I'm writhing in agony with a very bad back, dancing as hard and as fast as I can." I said, "The only thing holding me together is painkillers and attitude." And that was how I fell in love. Then the last friend, we didn't become lovers because he was married, he came in just after my dog died. I mean, he'd be kind of looking at me, but lovingly before then, you know, with genuine friendship type affection. But he, it was after Beauregard died when I went to the Brooklyn Standard and that whole thing kicked off. Like I say, nothing happened between us because much as I would have liked it, I wasn't going to do that to destroy someone's marriage. It's evil. And then oddly, he ended the friendship with me about a month after. When did Charlie die? 26th of January. 2 months after Charlie's death. So it was like an opening of a potentiate of great love that came in with Beauregard's demise and shut down again with Charlie's demise. Like a sea anemone, opening and closing. But it was evil. It was evil what they put me through. It really was. Really was evil. I'll never change my mind about that. Till my dying day, I'll think of none of it. None of that what they did to me, including Dave Charles many years ago. 2000 and... when did I meet him? I think it was 2014. Evil, evil. Turned on by me being crippled with a crippled back. what an ass. And there was another one came in when I was ill and vulnerable too. And they start off so charming and loving and sweet in the beginning that they really get your hopes up. You think, oh, this person's really genuine, seems so loving and kind and really seems to want me, and then and so no blind dates with Polish men I haven't even met, and no looking for love when I've just had my teeth done. Dear Goddess. Anyway, back to the story. Old and free. Old and free. Still, he made himself available to provide legal advice or to arrange a summer internship for some child or nephew. He saw Sharon from time to time. From time to time there were calls. Of course you're too busy, but of course you're not interested, but was how they began. This was the first thing Corinne and her husband and Martin, and whichever wife, were always all in accord about, that Otto seemed to feel he was too good for the rest of them, despite the obvious indications to the contrary. Who was too good for whom? I really do feel kind of feverish now. Well, I felt feverish before. Fever in the morning, fever all through the night. The Indian lady on the bus said, it was just so delightful and hilarious. She said, here you come from the dentist and you're about to lose, because I told her I'm about to have 2 teeth taken out. You're about to lose the 2 teeth, but you caught yourself a man. And we looked at each other and howled with laughter. And I was like, wait a minute, I caught myself the daughter of a man. And everyone on the bus, they all laughed and giggled. Oh, it was actually beautiful. It was just such perfect timing and tragic comedy. Oh yeah, toothless, but I'll have a man if I'm not careful, even toothless. What did I say last week? Who will want this hag, this toothless hag? Apparently, I've still got it going on, baby. I better not keep my mouth open too wide. Oh, you have to laugh. You really do have to laugh. She who will not be silenced, or thin-lipped, or stiff upper-lipped, or unceremoniously pricked, can see the funny side of things. Right. I needed that laugh. Who was too good for whom? It often came down to a show of force. Oop, we're losing the book. Just going to check on my baby voice. All right. When Corinne had called a week or so earlier about Thanksgiving, Otto, addled by alarm, said, we're having people ourselves, I'm afraid. Corinne's silence was like a mirror, flashing his tiny, harmless lie back to him in huge magnification, all covered with sticky hairs and microbes. you know, you should all know, YouTube audience, how the mama tea, the Tanya, the psychedelic dreamer, abhors liars, including those I was very close to and were determined to not spend Boxing Day with me this year. Like I fucking care. Fuck off. But it was such a blatant, cowardly, low-level lie that I just want to vomit a little bit in my mouth. But anyway, on we go. L'chaim. There's a Polish man out there with my name on him. Hopefully not literally. I met a man once at a clubhouse and they said, "You're destined to be together, you and this guy." I had no interest in him at all. He just got out of jail. Not the least bit interested in him. I said, "What do you mean we're destined to be together?" The guy looks at me. He had a good sense of humour, I'll give him that. Lifts up his shirt and in big, bold, like big letters, this big, tattooed across his chest, it said, "Tanya." He said, "Yeah, you're meant for me. I've already got your name tattooed on me." I went, "Hey," I said, "wait just a minute, Mr. Looks So Fine." And they all, his friends and him, just looked at me like this. I said, "Don't come the raw prawn with me. Don't think I came up on the down train." And they're all like, I said, "That tattoo belongs to another Tanya." "It does. How do you know?" I said, "If the other Tanya and you didn't work out, what hope do you think of working out with this Tanya?" "I was hoping you might give it a bit of a go." I mean, you have to laugh. Australians, ever hopeful. It was delightful though. They got very upset because I didn't want to, have connubial relations with him. Not even connubial. Didn't want to have casual sex with him either. Didn't want anything to do with the man. I mean, he wasn't ugly and he wasn't rude or obnoxious, but it's like, people, give me my own agency in making my own choices for the totally unsuitable dead shits I usually fall in love with. It might have been alright even though he just come out of jail. I usually give them therapy in jail and fix their teeth and they come out usually okay. Usually. Unless they're, repeat offenders or PDF files or serial killers. But anyway, I wasn't interested in him. It wasn't him, it was me. Now I might be dying of teeth sepsis. So it's all too little too late. Oh, poor mama too. Right, where were we? Trying not to die laughing. With my mouth open. Laughing. She who laughs last laughs best and longest. Kill me, but what a way to go. Right. "Well, I'll see what I can do," he said. "Please try," Corinne said. The phrase had the unassailable authority of a road sign appearing suddenly around the bend, a falling rock. "Otto, the children are growing up." "Children? What children?" "Your children grew up years ago, Corinne. Your children are old now, like us." "I meant, of course, Martin's, the new ones. Martin and Laurie's. And there's Portia." "Portia? Oh yes, the little girl, the sole, thank heavens, issue of Martin's marriage to that crazy Viola." "I'll see what I can do," Otto said, again, this time less cravenly. It was Corinne's own fault. A person of finer sensibilities would have written a note or used email, or would face-savingly have left a message at his office. Giving him time to prepare. I've gone all bright red, haven't I? All right, maybe it's time to stop talking. Look like a big red tomato. I'll see what I can do, Otto said again, this time less cravenly. 'Twas Corinne's own fault. A person of finer sensibilities would have written a note or used email, or would face-savingly have left a message at his office, giving him time to prepare some well-crafted deterrent rather than whatever makeshift explosive he would obviously be forced to lob back at her under direct attack. Wesley and I are having it in the city this year, Corinne was saying. No need to come all the way out to the nasty country. A few hours and it will all be over with. Seriously, Otto, you're an integral element. We're keeping it simple this year. This year? Corinne, there have been no other years. You do not observe Thanksgiving. In fact, Otto, we do, and we all used to. Who? All of us. Never. When? Can you imagine Mother being thankful for anything? We always celebrated Thanksgiving when Father was alive. I remember no such thing. I do. I remember, and so does Martin. Martin was 4 when Father died. Well, you were little too. I was twice Martin's age. Oh, Otto, I just feel sad sometimes, to tell you the truth, don't you? It's all going so fast. I'd like to see everyone in the same room once a century or so. I want to see everybody well and happy. I mean, you and Martin and Sharon were my brothers and sister. What was that all about? Don't you remember? Playing together all the time? I just remember Martin throwing up all the time. You'll be nice to him, won't you, Otto? He's still very sensitive. He won't want to talk about the lawsuit. Have you spoken to Sharon? Well, that's something I wanted to talk to you about, actually. I'm afraid I might have offended her. I stress the fact that it was only to be us this year. No aunts or uncles, no cousins, no friends, just us. Oh, it's a reflection coming off my dress. Okay, freaked out for a minute there. Thought I was turning purple. Just us, and husbands or wives, husband and wife, or whatever, and children naturally. But she became very hostile. Assuming William to be whatever, Otto said. Why shouldn't Sharon bring a friend if she wants to? William is family. And surely you remember when she brought that person to Christmas? The person with the feet? I wish you'd go by and talk to her in the next few days. She seems to listen to you. Otto fished up a magazine from the floor, one of the popular science magazines William always left lying around, and idly opened it. Wesley and I reach out to her, Corinne was saying, and so does Martin, but she doesn't respond. I know it can be hard for her to be with people, but we're not people. We're family. I'm sure she understands that, Corinne. I hope you do too, Otto. How clearly she could see through the phone line. This little sister of his, in her 50s now, the 6-year-old's expression of aggrieved anxiety long etched decisively on her face. In any case, she said, I've called. Let's just see how long the next part is, because I'm fading people away. As I said, this is going to be a very long story, made longer by my own personal stories, so there is that. We'll read one more page, just over a page. And yet, there was something to what Corinne had said. They had been one another's environs as children. The distance between them had been as great in any important way as it was now. But there had been no other beings close by, no other beings through whom they could probe or illumine the mystifying chasms and absences and yearnings within themselves. They had been born into the arid clutter of one another's behaviour, good and bad, their measles, skinned knees, report cards. A barren landscape dotted with clutter, perhaps the life of the last dinosaurs, as they ranged, puzzled and sorrowful, across the comet-singed planet, was similar to childhood. It hadn't been a pleasant time, surely, and yet one did have an impulse to acknowledge one's antecedents now and again. Hello, that was us. It still is. Goodbye. I don't know, William said. It doesn't seem fair to put any pressure on Sharon. Heaven forfend. But I did promise Corinne I'd speak with Sharon, and after all, I have actually seen her for some time. Sorry, haven't actually seen her for some time. We could just go and have a plain old visit, though. I don't know. Urging her to go to Corinne's. I'm not really comfortable with that. Oof, William. Phrase, please. Jargon. Oh, why is that jargon? Why? How should I know why? Because it is. You can say, I'm uncomfortable about that, or oh, that makes me uncomfortable. But I'm uncomfortable with that is simply jargon. Haven't really thought about that. Probably say it all the time myself. Oh. He picked up a book sitting next to him on the table and opened it. A Relativity for Dummies. Good heavens, he said, snapping the book shut. Obviously, Martin doesn't want to talk about the lawsuit. Why bother to mention that to me? Does she think I'm going to ask Martin whether it's true that he's been misrepresenting the value of his client's stock? Am I likely to talk about it? I'm perfectly happy to read about it in the Times every day like everyone else. You know, William said, we could go away early this year. We could just pick up and leave on Wednesday if you'd like. I would not like. I would like you to play in your concert as always. William took the book from Otto and held Otto's hand between his own. They're not really so bad, you know, your family, he said. As sometimes William's consolations were oddly like provocations. Easy for you to say, Otto said. Not that easy. I'm sorry, Otto said. I know. And I'll come back to complete a few more pages of the story tomorrow. I'm starting to feel woozy and a bit weak, so that's enough for today. This would be from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. I'm going to go and have a bit of a rest again, I think. Oh, poor Mama T, being sold off by a young Polish girl to her daddy. But honestly, the minute she looked at me and stood up and said, you can have my seat, and I kind of looked at her, there was this kind of soul recognition, like, you know, the what turned out to be the Polish ancestral connection. Isn't it bizarre, these things that can draw people to each other? And you just have to be cautious because, you know, ancestral connections doesn't necessarily mean people are good and kind. I tend to be drawn more to the exotic, and well, they weren't necessarily good and kind either. So there is that. Maybe I'm destined to go back to the ancestral homelands, but you know, it was my great-grandmother who was born in Poland in Poznan or Posen, in German it was called Posen, and my grandmother, whom I never met, my mother's mother, still identified as Polish, even though she was born in Charlottenburg, Berlin. So it was a bit odd. She still spoke Polish because her mother spoke to her in Polish, I guess, as a child. So when the Nazis invaded Poland, my grandmother got a very courageous and dangerously got herself a wireless radio tuned to the BBC and went out throwing bread and borscht to prisoners in holding camps waiting to be shipped off to, I guess, other camps all around Germany and Europe. So it was a very courageous thing that she did, but also a very life-threatening, because if she'd been caught she would have been shot instantly or put in a concentration camp. More likely shot, because she was throwing the bread and screaming down with Hitler and running. So, well, my mother told me this, so she must have, you know, seen her mother do it or got told about it second hand by her own mother or family friends. But Mum said to me, just having that radio, they were 3 stories up, alone was enough to get shot if you were caught with a radio tuned to the BBC. So yes, just a little segue there. And but yes, my grandmother definitely identified as being a Polish national, even though she was born and raised in Germany and what became East Germany when the Russians invaded and carved Berlin in half. I've got a photo of the charity hospital she was born in Charlottenburg, and her mother was an unwed mother, so had to work off her confinement, which was paying for the medical care she received birthing Eva Kissau. So yes, hard times. And there was no father listed on the birth certificate, but I often wonder if my grandmother's father was actually Jewish, and in a way was lucky, if that is true, if that is the case, that he wasn't listed, because it would have made my grandmother deemed to be Jewish by the Nazi Party, and her entire family would have been shipped off to the concentration camps. But I honestly, we don't know, because it's not recorded and nothing was ever spoken about who the actual father was. And all we kind of know is that my great-grandmother came out as a young girl, as a servant, working for some wealthy landlord, and as often the case with young girls in wealthy homes, either got taken advantage of or was worded, or, you know, quite willingly entered into an affair with either the boss or the boss's son. Often was a common thing with poor people in Europe, and also in England and Scotland, Wales, right across. It was a common theme. Poor people didn't have a lot to say about agency and keeping themselves pristine sometimes. Weren't a lot of options. And there were a lot of evil things that were done to young girls, you know, who were alone in a foreign country. I mean, even in our modern times, it still goes on. See also the Epstein files. So anyway, that's that story. That's that part of my family history that we'll never fully know the whole truth connected to that. But I know my grandmother Eva had a small little ornament of a chanakia, you know, 8-branched menorah candlestick. So she must have had someone Jewish gift that to her as a present at some stage of her life. And she had Jewish friends that were opera singers that were forced by Hitler, I think before the war really got going, but it had already started with this oppression of Jews. He forced the husband, who was not Jewish, to divorce the wife who was, in exchange for she was not allowed to sing in the opera theatre anymore, and somehow or other he got her out of the country and got her to England. But they were forced into divorce by the Nazi Party. Really, a lot of all that stuff was going on prior to the final solution, where they just shipped everyone off to the concentration camps. So there is that. Anyway, it's a rainy day and morose, and it was such a lovely day this morning. I had hopes that I was going to keep the birdie boys out all day, but then the rain came. So you're back inside, nice and dry, with your mother, your human mother. Oh, mother! They loved it when there was a shower earlier and they had their wings like this, and Bo puffed himself, all his feathers up to get as much of the rain on him as possible. And he was so happy, and he looked at me all fluffed up. What are you doing? You look like a little pigeon. And it wasn't too wet, but then the the black clouds came over an hour later and looked more intentional, so I brought them in, just as well I did, because it's rained ever since 2 p.m. Anyway, a blessed be from a sacred space at Titania's realm. I hope you enjoyed today's segues and anecdotes. I think they're quite delightful and funny. But wasn't she sweet, that young girl, saying, I hope I see you on this route, on this bus route again, see you again. And I said, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And anyway, I'll remember her next time if I see her again. Sweet little one she was, really sweet. Strange encounters I have when I'm out in public, and on public buses can be a bit bizarre, sometimes a bit confronting too. Like the other time when I was catching the bus to go to the Brooklyn Standard one evening, there was this young Asian girl, and randomly she turned to me and she also said, I'm going to suicide. And I talked her down. The bus driver was listening into my conversation with her because we were the only ones on the bus. And she was right off her chops, she was. It was a bit of a worry. I said, you're going to do no such thing, and don't be so ridiculous, I said. I wonder if all these young people being actively threatening suicide seems to be more frequent than usual. I wonder if that's an adverse reaction. Because it's like I said, it's the second time I've had someone very young just randomly turn to me and say, I want to suicide. Anyway, I said, you're going to do no such thing. You're out with your beautiful friends who are supporting you and loving you. And you're going to have a wonderful birthday. She looked at me and nodded. Honestly, what has become of our world, that it's just so cold and clinical and detached and devoid of soul? At least if I should die, people of Earth, I don't know when I'll die, when my time will come, I will die with my soul intact. Take great pride in that. It's probably my only success I've ever achieved in my entire life. Somehow, with my great faith in the gods, the Holy One, and all manifestations of beauty and goodness and love and righteousness and honour and integrity and peace and prosperity and healing. Let's not forget the healing part. The Holy One has restored my soul. To you, wherever you are, out there or in here or above or below, it is what it is. Blessed be from sacred space at Titania's realm. Love to you all. Bye for now.